for those of you who don't know, Ad Zombies is still what we call in its startup phase. Now, I don't know what you exactly call, like what determines it to be a startup phase, but we're still in a startup phase. The company's very young, couple of years old, 2.5 years old, and we're growing and we're making money, not a ton of money. I wish we were making more money, but that's okay. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I love what I'm doing. But along the way, I was introduced to this woman sitting next to me, Meaghan, who I knew from the first time we had lunch together that I needed her in this company. And it took a while for me to feel comfortable with a couple things. Number one, financially, I wanted us to be in the right place before we made a hiring decision of that scale. Okay, yes, you can already do the math in your head. Scale means that she's being paid more than other people. Okay, that's fine. But for me to be able to sleep with that, I needed to know that financially we were in a good place. And because I don't take decisions like that lightly, it's important for me to put the right people in the right place to move fast, but also make good financial decisions. So after many lunches and what would you say, about a year?
Yeah, probably a year.
And of course, like nobody knows that we're actually recording, so I'm just going to delete that and just let it go. It was my wife. She's going to see this on film, and I'm going to be like screwed. Allison, I'll get back to you. Or by the time you see this, I will have gotten back to you. She'll never watch any of this. So it was about a year, but I knew I wanted you as part of the Ad Zombies team. What did I say or do that convinced you to jump ship? Because I basically stole you away from another. That's what I say to people. I stole her from a big MLM. But the reality is that what it was? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, but I was working in a place that was basically a cruise ship, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think of a startup as a speedboat, the company I was at was running more like a cruise ship, right? You couldn't make fast turns. It had gotten big, almost 20 years old, and yeah, it was in the network marketing industry, but that was never my industry. And you see a lot of people in that industry in the corporate side who are lifers, right? Like it's all they know.
Hardcore.
They're specialists. Hardcore. I got into it by accident because I liked what the company did in terms of product. The first meetings I had were like blah, blah, pyramid scheme, blah, blah, junk science. And I had those discussions with my now husband.
Right.
And then we decided it was okay. It was worth moving toward. I was there for 6 years. There were things I loved about it and things that didn't work super well for me. And one of the things I realized was a corporate culture that big is hard for someone like me who likes to sort of move fast, see results. I like to ask sort of challenging questions and be able to act on the responses. Okay. And at a certain size, when you have hundreds of employees, that's not something that happens when you are a contributing level employee or even a mid-level manager.
Okay.
You don't have that freedom to ask questions, demand answers, and then take action.
So what was it about the chaos and craziness of this shit? Like, because really, you came in, you joined us, we were a few employees deep.
Yep.
No, more than a few employees. We have employees and subs, right? We have a mix. But you're coming into this fucking chaotic world, and all men in the leadership role. Does that bother you?
It doesn't, though, because it's not like you guys were like, we're never going to hire ladies. Like that, a company like this starts by accident, right? Like you've told the story about how the company started. So for me, when I came in, it was sort of an accident. I got asked to freelance. I got asked to write. I liked some sweet side gig money. For me, that was a perfect fit for a long time. But I kept asking you guys weird questions like, hey, at so-and-so, what if it did this? Or hey, at so-and-so, I noticed this is weird or difficult or like
immediately
strange, right?
One of the things that appealed to me about you from the get was you were always adding more value than the dollars you were extracting from the company. When I say extracting, that's not meant to be bad.
Well, it's a very transactional approach when you have a freelancer, right? So I write X, I get X dollars, right? So but to me it was interesting because like solving the problem of how do you grow this was interesting.
And it's a fucking puzzle.
It is. And one of the things that I got to experience because I am a sort of like pokey question asker was for a long time in my previous company, I was like the only one that went from the third floor, sales and marketing floor, down to the IT floor. And so I ended up on a lot of cool projects, right? Like I ended up in a weird space in the organization where like unintentionally, where it was like, oh, start a new department and like help with a new website for 13 countries and like 30 total language variations, but like review all this content and fix it. And So I ended up having these great conversations with people on the IT floor and being able to translate the needs of the business to them in a way that no one had bothered to do. So I got to have really great relationships internally and like stick my hands in weird, cool projects. I mean, like developing a new app from scratch with a third-party vendor, and I still have relationships with the vendors there, right? So to me, it was always just so interesting to solve problems like that and like what's next and how do we do that and how do we take this whole code base that's sort of antiquated and turn it into something that works with our other code bases, but why does it work this way? And like, what does it do for the company and the people that use it? And our IT team didn't have that exposure because they had turned over the years or not worked on the same projects. And so for them, the needs of the business weren't really at the forefront of their mind.
There's no clarity, I'm guessing.
No, and so when you're in a company that big, like if you can understand what the business is for and who it serves and what the priority is, like that's huge. And it sounds so obvious, but it's not to people.
Okay, so let's step back for a second. You were kind of immersed in the Ad Zombies culture just over the course of a year as a freelancer. But I knew I wanted you to be a part of this team, and you and I had started having conversations back and forth about that. We had met for a couple of lunches, we some wine and cheese, and like we've had some real sit downs. What is it though? Like, I know as a CEO, I am so ADD, so ADHD. I'm all over the place. Does that drive you nuts? First of all, be honest. I'm cool with that. Tell me what you hate about it.
It doesn't, because I know it. Because I'm not blindsided by it.
Okay.
Right? So like when I came in, all the facts were on the table. Right? I knew who you were and how you worked, right? I knew where the company was, where you weren't. Like I knew that this is a company that runs lean. But I also knew that you guys were open to solving problems, right? That if I was able to ask a question and formulate an opinion, it would get listened to. Instead of that sort of corporate red tape space of like, oh, we just have this corporate inertia and we can't, or like our tech debt's so deep that we can't even think about this project even though it has value. And like those are things that happen at any corporation at a certain point. And for me, the exciting thing was getting here early so that I could be part of that growth and like prevent those sort of issues and like help us scale. And so that to me, that problem solving is so interesting. And yeah, I mean, you are the way you are, but I knew that, right?
So I'm unapologetic for it.
It's not like I came in and you were like, okay, I have a set schedule and I'm very logical and I am reasonable, and then it was like, oh, you're a fucking maniac. That's no, because a bait and switch is the problem for me.
Right.
Like meeting people where they are, as long as they are self-aware and forthcoming about it, fine, great.
Right. Yeah, I know my weaknesses and I know my strengths, and I have like one strength.
Well,
and that's it.
You can say to people like, oh, you should work on your weaknesses. But one way to work on your weaknesses is to build a team that's strong where you are not strong.
Right.
So that you can just be exceptional at what you're exceptional at.
I choose to do that because I have spent the first 50 years of my life trying to improve the things that I sucked at, and found that I marginally got better at them.
Yeah.
Way easier to surround yourself with people like you, like Brandon, people who have strengths in the areas that you suck at. There's a reason that I don't run the books on the business, right? There's a reason we have Melinda.
Same, yes.
Okay. So if you were to do it all over again, so revisit the last year, then when you joined us many months ago, if you were to do something different, like if you could magically wave a wand and fix one thing, and none of this is practice rehearsed, I'm throwing this at you. What would you change?
I have an answer for that. I would actually make you guys onboard me like I knew nothing about the company.
Oh, how? Okay, why?
So, do you remember that time I sent you a text and I was like, we hit this huge landmark this month for income?
God. Yeah, okay.
And you were like, where the fuck are you getting that number?
Let me give you some context. So prior to Meaghan joining the company, in fact, back it up to March 6, 2017, we had no systems, no processes in place. And so when Meaghan joined the company, we had already built some systems and processes. When I say we, not me, Brandon, and he's the guy that builds, he's our magic button maker. In fact, that's on his cards. He's our operations person, but he's our magic button maker. We didn't have those things in place, but Brandon built for me, because I have ADD, visual dashboards. I need visual things, like visual cues are great for me. If I just looked at spreadsheets all day and numbers all day, I gloss over, I'd be in a coma in the room behind me. And so we have numbers that, like, on a daily basis, I can see the daily sales revenue, the volume of jobs in our system, you know, and I can see the monthly recurring revenue, total monthly revenue, all those things. And you were excited because you thought we hit this like magic number because you were adding two together.
That from the labels made sense to me.
Absolutely.
But when you guys built them, it was total, and of that total, X
percentage.
Is,
right.
Yeah.
So if we had onboarded you as if you knew nothing, we would have discovered that.
And those labels made sense to you guys because you built it as you needed it.
Correct.
Right? So like the labels weren't wrong, they just weren't so specific that you couldn't mess it up if you were new.
They were intuitive to us because we were there at the foundational laying of the track.
I think there are like two kinds of startup businesses. One is you have like this bright, shiny idea and you go like talk to venture capitalists and you like live in Silicon Valley and you like build it for like 3 years and then you launch it.
Right.
And it's magical or it's not, right? Or it's not magical and then suddenly it takes off. And then there are businesses like this, which is, oh, there's a need. Oh, we're doing it. Oh, this is a business. Oh, we should treat it like a business. Let's build the stuff to treat it like a business and scale. And because you guys built as you went, things happen to get through the day, to get through the month, to get through the year, that you're going to have to unwind eventually, which is fine as long as you know where they are. But the things you forget to document in a certain way or really explain will surprise you.
And let me explain. So something that just happened to us today, right?
Yeah.
So we're sitting down filming this right after Labor Day, the Labor Day holiday weekend. Well, over the weekend, we had to do some system changes, and we updated a password in one of our main accounts. Well, that main account is attached to, so the backbone of our system, the ads system, the advertising delivery system, it's trademarked. If you read it in the book, you know that. The backbone of that system is built in Podio. And so there are these automation flows that happen behind the scenes, like really technical stuff that Brandon understands.
I've tried to explain stuff and
work.
got like, I'm always wrong.
Anyway, but the changing of that password caused a tsunami, a ripple effect, an unintended consequence, and that Brandon had like 1,600 emails in his box this morning that were undeliverable because of the change that I made to this one password when we were updating things. So it's, again, this is part of startup life. You know, it's not all easy, it's not all rosy, but it's fun. And every day is different.
Yeah, sometimes it's raw and real.
Yep.
And some days you get kicked in the ass.
Yeah. And one of the things that what I like about you so much is that you're brutal. Your honesty. You're like, there's no, you don't like paint with, you know, fairy dust and unicorn farts. You are just like raw and honest about stuff. And I like that because for me, you know, I tend to live way up here in the clouds, and so I'm always in this really different space, and that grounds me very quickly because I can see, oh shit, I didn't realize that, or we fucked that up, and I need that around me, and that's Brandon provides that, you provide that, and the more I surround myself with people like that, the better.
One of the things I think is a huge disservice that employees do to executives or owners in a company is pretend everything's fine when it's not. And that's how things get really bad, as opposed to like, oh, that sucked, let's fix it. And I think that when you see employees who are so busy sugarcoating shit so that executives and owners and like C-suite and upper management feel good, that is not a healthy culture.
So what is the one thing that you've done since you've joined us that you go, yes, like I did this?
You know, okay, so there's two things. One is personal, and I'll start with that. And then, yes, I have two. Okay, so on a personal level, I actually go to the gym in the middle of the day twice a week. And that was weird as fuck for me to commit to because I still have that baggage of like, I go to work and I'm an employee. And that's not acceptable as an employee. And that's okay, right? Like if you're an entry-level employee, please do not go to your boss, your supervisor, and be like, I'm going to need to leave for an hour and a half twice a week in the middle of the morning. Like, if that is not cool at your company, don't try to make it cool at your company. But as you grow in a leadership capacity, PSA over, you change how you work, right? Like it's no longer about when you clock in. It's no longer about like a certain volume of to-do lists that you check off, even though to-do lists are still very satisfying for me, like that feeling of checking off.
Like I know that's one thing about you.
Good.
Like that, if you have a compulsion, you've got to check things off. I got it.
I like that. But you can change how you work, right? So yeah, I check email at 7 o'clock sometimes, and yeah, I like check on the system, and yes, I occasionally jump in and like work on the production side on weekends to make sure that I feel good that the system's still going. But I balance that with leaving at a reasonable time most days. I balance that with being able to go to the gym and not feel guilty about it.
Right.
And that is.
And if I ever make you feel guilty about that, kick me.
No, you set a reminder to kick me out of the office.
I did.
Like.
Well, part of it is so I come from, my history is I have corporate baggage, right? We all have like corporate baggage from the way other companies that we worked for were run. And one of the things I hated about that was I felt like I was a prisoner of the company during work hours rather than, hey, I do some amazing stuff for the business. Like, can I be an adult? Can I just, I'd like to go out and have an hour and a half lunch today, or go to the gym for an hour and a half, or whatever.
Yeah, it's really hard because when you think about it in terms of a production level employee, right? Like, take the example of a factory. You can't just be like, deuces, guys, I'm going to leave this unsupervised, right? And so as you evolve in your career, hopefully you get to leave those days behind so that you're not always beholden to exactly the hours, exactly like working on the production line. But when you're on the line, like you have to be there.
You have to show up and be there,
when you have employees that have to be on the line, it can be really hard for you to detach from that compulsion to like also demonstrate that behavior, right? Like, I don't want you to feel like you have to be here from 8 to 5 to demonstrate to me that you work. Like that's nonsense. That's shenanigans. But it can be a total like mind game with yourself where you're like, oh, well, I have to demonstrate that working hours are important. Well,
right.
If you're in a role where working hours are important.
And I've done that, and I was doing that for a while. As we were growing and have been growing, there are times where I feel like I have to set the role model, be the role model for the team. And what sucks about that is that, and you know this because you and I communicate with each other in off hours, like late at night. I get texts from you. In fact, when I went on vacation, you sent me a message that said, shut off your notifications, do this, do that, right? You're telling me to disconnect.
Yeah.
And the same thing, when you go away for a weekend or a trip, I'm like, disconnect, right?
Yeah.
We don't want you to get burned out. But I felt like for a while, I had to model that behavior. And what people don't see behind the scenes is that oftentimes I'm sitting with my laptop on the couch at 11 o'clock at night doing stuff, working on things for the business, or up at 4 in the morning working. Brandon and I would get texts from Brandon at 4 in the morning. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing awake at 4 in the morning? But it's challenging. And so what we're trying to do now culturally is shift to where we only bring in people who are self-starters, who don't need to be babysat, who don't need someone to lead by example for hours, and
I actually went and talked to a local UX group in August and just said, like, hey, I will be an example of a startup client that you guys would potentially talk to, and just ask me anything, and I'll kind of, just answer your questions with some radical candor. And one of the things that came up was, everyone's ideal client has all the money and all the time and all the respect for you to go into a dark hole and like deliver creative work, and that client does not exist.
No.
Right? In like anything, whether it's coding or creative work, that doesn't exist. So when you show up to work, if you're a creative person, whether that's someone who writes code to solve a problem or writes ad copy, there is just not room for anyone to show up at a job and be like, I'm writing the great American novel and I'll be in my trailer until I get the right pair of shoes. Like, that doesn't fucking exist.
Right.
Now, you can ask difficult questions and you can challenge beliefs as long as everyone believes you're rowing in the same direction, right?
True.
So that's all part of a culture, though, of like radical candor and everyone being clear on their roles and where they're going, and then respecting each other enough to say, hey, it feels like we're not rowing in the same direction. Let's talk about that.
Right.
But that only happens when people are self-aware of what their role is, when they look at the company as a whole, when they see what the company is trying to do, what you are not, and like, so that doesn't really work unless everyone's rowing the same direction and committed to it, right? So if you're in a car with someone and you're veering into a middle lane and they just let you, that doesn't feel good for anyone, right? If they're willing to say, hey, Ken, a little to the right, dude. That's a positive challenge.
Right, for sure.
You know, and that is not to say that you ever veer into lanes. It's an anecdote I heard separately on a podcast.
I got that. How do you feel today that our team structure, health, overall, like you're looking at the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Your title is T.G.I.F, which is Team Growth Infrastructure Facilitator.
Yep.
Really big words, but I
cool
like
acronym, though.
a cool acronym, right? You have a T.G.I.F. What's that? She's the Friday coordinator? No.
Always, you guys.
But
I go to American restaurants and I steal swag off their walls. That's my job.
right. How do you feel we are positioned today? Like looking at the company and the team as an overall. Like, give me your 30,000-foot view.
So one of the things I'm really excited about, to kind of come back to your earlier question, is one of the things we did really early on when I first got here was we restructured how we looked at assigning content to writers. So we rethought, how do we look at volume of work? How do we look at who's working, when they're working, how much they're working? Because to me, this business is only going to grow, which means our volume of ads is going to grow, which means it needs to be as simple as possible to assign work to our writers, whether they're in the office next to me at a desk or whether they're across the country or across the world. So we radically changed how we thought about that and how we thought about assignments and flow and like a whole bunch of other boring shit. But I think it's really made everyone a lot less stressed, right? So if
Agree.
you, like, I don't stress about how much is unassigned anymore, or I don't stress about how much is in production, because we found an objective way to look at that that allows us to really know where we are, how much we're writing, and like if we have the right number of writers. So that to me was a big help, because I remember going into weekends, even as a freelancer, being like, oh man, like that's a lot of work.
Yep.
Or how are we going to get all this done? Or just like
load balancing was a challenge for
Yeah.
a while, and you know, as we've grown, fortunately, we're nimble enough, as you said earlier, that we can make quick changes and quick decisions. Now, some of them are painful.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
Others are really just, okay, you know what? Gosh, why didn't we think of this 2 years ago?
Exactly.
But I'm thrilled that you're part of this, and there's not a day that goes by where you walk in and I go, I'm like, no, absolutely. You know, yes, I'm going to start working on getting you to drink less sweet wines. That's one of my goals.
I mean, whatever.
You drink candy wines, but I used to do that too.
But
so,
not like pink ones.
no, but everybody starts with sweet, and then they slowly work their way to
okay.
real wines. We're going to continue to.
But
work.
I drink really good beer.
Okay, I don't drink beer.
Okay, whatever.
It's too bloating.
I know.
I sound
But we
like-
make our own. You're such a girl. Oh my god.
sound
Yeah,
like
you thought there were no women on the leadership team before me.
Anyway.
Gender roles are hard, you guys.
Yes, they are.
Said the woman who retired her husband to be a stay-at-home dad.
And he does an amazing job.
He's the director of nutritional output.
And your son has an office.
That is a huge change too. Is it like I don't feel stressed about like letting Liam come over, right?
Sure. He's
We
great
have
in
a
the
pretty
office.
casual, every now and then. He's just turned 4, so sometimes everything is hard when you're just turning 4. But
I have
overall,
lived through
pretty
having a
solid human.
4-year-old 5 times.
yes,
And so I know what 4 feels like.
yes. Cheers to
So,
that.
awesome. Well, I'm glad you got to sit down. I popped this on you. So I had a lunch meeting earlier before this, and if I'm sweating, it's not because I'm nervous talking to Meaghan. We went to Thai food, and I ordered hot, but not Thai hot, just American, hot.
Yeah, civilian hot.
Civilian hot. It came out like Thai hot, and
That's a real commitment to excellence.
I still, I feel like I have sweat just pouring out of me still. My skin is glistening.
But it makes you look
With-
dewy.
Thank you. But I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I was
I'm
able
glad
to
to be
pull
here.
you out of your office and get you to sit down and look at this. I was just like, oh, she's gonna get on camera today. Let's go.
Okay.
So thanks, Meaghan.
Cheers.
You rock.
You rock.